Now let's go with the second and final part. Fractional and direct delayed carbon killers. Let's begin the second part with two clear facts. Fact number 1. Climate change, or climate chaos, is already killing people throughout the world. Some die for various health impacts, others die at floods, hurricanes, wildfires, and other extreme weather events. Others by famine caused by extreme droughts and crop failures. Others in the course of migration routes trying to escape all these problems. All of this directly linked to climate chaos. Fact number 2. Climate chaos is not an accident. It's caused by excess carbon emitted by humans, which cannot be reabsorbed quick enough by the biosphere. So the obvious conclusion should be humans are killing other humans, together with thousands of other living beings, by disrupting the climate with their carbon emissions. We can visualize this invisible genocide in various ways. For example, each time we turn the key of a petrol-run car, we are triggering a bullet that will kill, or at least help killing, somebody. Not at the very moment, of course, but at some time in the future. Maybe our own children or grandchildren, and it could be even ourselves. Why do I say this? Because we are contributing each and every day with some kilograms of carbon dioxide to worsen climate change, and effects of climate change are already killing people. So even if we don't see the blood, if we don't hear the screams, we are killing people day by day. It's kind of a boomerang effect. It might resound like a karma effect, but in reality karma can be interpreted in systems dynamic terms because every act in our lives has a feedback. And that is the real karma thing, dynamic feedbacks. But how can we measure our responsibility? I think this is a very important question, which is not easy to answer. Being Earth climate a dynamic system, answering this question should require a complex calculation, because our emissions won't probably kill people this year, but at some time in the future, and people dying because of climate chaos this year is being killed by carbon emitted during past years, maybe even our parents' emissions, not ours. To make it even more difficult to calculate, climate system has feedbacks, so simple extrapolations into the future wouldn't be very accurate. But let's keep it simple for the moment and make some simple and conservative calculation to just approximate our liability in this massive criminal case. The simplest approach would be to divide the number of climate victims per year by the total carbon emissions, so we get the total deaths per kilogram or metric ton of carbon. Then you only need to multiply this number by your emissions. Well, so let's begin with the first figures. How many people are dying now by climate chaos? Calculations can only be approximate, as World Health Organization recognizes, but numbers have been proposed around 250,000 deaths per year. Please remember that this is a very conservative number, which clearly underestimates the real number of deaths. I've taken numbers given by World Health Organization for 2030 because residence time of CO2 in the atmosphere can be estimated to be 10 years. So what we are emitting in 2020 will be having killing effects for a long time, but especially until 2030. And this is not taking into account feedbacks. That's not to mean that after those 10 years our emissions are reabsorbed. They keep on making damage a lot of time after that first decade. But for simplicity, we could say that the worst is done during those first 10 years of mean residence time. I want to notice that these figures don't include general deaths by air or water pollution, which are in numbers of millions per year worldwide, as we can see at WHO statistics. Neither I took into account deaths at wars and other armed conflicts triggered by climate chaos, like Syria, where nearly 500,000 people have died in the civil war which began 9 years ago. So I remind you that the previous figure is a very low estimate. Now let's continue with our carbon killing calculations. Given that anthropogenic emissions of CO2 and equivalents are about 43 gigatons per year, that is 43 trillion kilograms. I use trillion as in English, that is 10 raised to the 12th power, 1 with 12 zeros. Divided by number of deaths, it gives that 172,000 tons, 172,000 million kilograms, correspond to one death. For a reference, to be able to compare this amount of carbon per capita per year emissions are 17 tons for the USA, 17 for Australia too, 5.7 for Spain, 7 for China, 8.5 for Finland, one of the biggest in Europe, 12 for Russia, 9 for Japan, but only 1.6 for Costa Rica, 2.5 for Cuba, 2.4 for Egypt, 2.2 for Vietnam, 0.6 for Nigeria, etc. So it takes 10,000 US citizens to kill one person with their yearly emissions, and 30,000 Spaniards for the same killing. My own town in Galicia has a population around that number. We could dramatically visualize this killing in a metaphorical way. It's like me and all of my neighbors making a yearly ritual in which we take a human being and sacrifice him or her in town's central square. New York City, with a total rounded population of 8 million, would make a similar sacrifice in Times Square of 790 people each year. If total deaths per ton are 1 divided by 172, then each time you travel by car and do, let's say, 10 kilometers, and your car emits 100 grams per kilometer, then you are emitting 1 kilogram of CO2 equivalent. And from the relation previously established, we could say that you have killed a 172 millionth part of a person. That might not seem a great crime, and it would take 17 million travels of 10 kilometers to kill one person. But how many commuting car travels of such a distance are done in our cities each day? Then that number already starts to seem tragically realistic, doesn't it? And every driver has its own small part of guilt at the corresponding homicide. And remember, we are just taking into account climate change, not other pollution effects of car driving that kill people by the millions worldwide each year. Feel guilty? Some fraction of guilt is on your head right now? Some drops of blood on your hands? Well, then you can obey the good thinking mentality, the green industry marketing slogans, or your Ministry of Energy Transition advices, and send your petrol car to scrap and buy a brand new electric one with so-called zero emissions, so you can feel you are killing 0 people when you drive it. But wait a minute. Think twice. Electric cars and their batteries are not built from thin air. They consume oil in their construction, a lot of oil, and consequently they emit a lot of carbon. It's said that an electric car, before its first kilometer, has already emitted between 5 and 35 tons of CO2 depending on the model. That means that it takes to build between 5,000 and 34,000 electric cars to kill a human being, depending on model, type of battery, etc. If we change all cars in the world, 1.2 billion, to electric, like most things we should do to save the planet, that would mean before their first kilometer to kill between 35,300 and 240,000 people. A huge human sacrifice to preserve our present-day hypermobility, isn't it? And I remind you once again, the numbers of future victims are clearly underestimated. If you just think of the hundreds of thousands of millions of predicted climate refugees and their probable fate in a world in chaos, where every country will try to save only its own people, closing its borders to any other, as we are seeing right now in Europe with just a few thousands of refugees, we can easily recognize that future victims could be counted by the millions. So our killing power, the carbon emissions, is for sure much greater than what I have used for my calculations. Of course, we emit carbon by more ways besides building or driving cars. If we want to make calculations fit to reality, we should not only include direct emissions by our car or plane travels, but also those indirect emissions produced to operate our homes and offices, to grow, transport, preserve, and prepare our food, etc. That is the embedded energy of the products. That's the total carbon footprint of our lifestyles. It's our total carbon footprint, aforementioned, what accounts. Cars or planes are just one of our weapons of our collective climate killing. General transportation and housing are the main contributors to our general carbon footprint in industrialized countries. There are quite a bunch of carbon calculators online, and you can use them, like a good non-killing tool, to reduce your own involuntary fractional homicides. Yes, we are committing a collective crime, and it's very asymmetrical depending on what country you are living in, depending mainly on your lifestyle, on your personal carbon footprint. Rich people living rich lifestyles have quite a bigger carbon footprint, could be more than 3 times than their poorer neighbors. We could even call them unconscious carbon serial killers. So inequity has a lot to do with collective crime, with this collective crime. But the saddest thing to think is that even poor people, especially in rich countries, are killing maybe their own grandsons and daughters. For example, the 10% poorest households in the US emit 18 tons per year, data related to 2009. And that's a lot more than the average in many countries of the world. The relation between income and emissions creates what some have called the equity pollution dilemma. That is, that when you raise income of poor people, that correlates with an increase in their emissions. But today we don't have the time to explore that dilemma, interesting as it is. You could rightly say, it's not that easy, because the total amount of people killed last year, for example, by climate change, cannot be related with emissions produced this year. And that's true. I have acknowledged that before. Carbon emissions have a big inertia, so present emissions will only cause effects many years ahead in an accumulative way. But that question makes no point against my previous calculations, because present emissions are greater than past emissions, so people dying in the future due to climate change will be more in total and per emissions precisely because of that inertia and that accumulative effect. So this argument keeps on having sense, a tragical sense. Veselin Popovsky from the Institute of Sustainability and Peace at the United Nations University puts it very clear. Climate change victims are victims of human rights violations. And he adds, climate change victimization can be linked not only to violations of civil and political rights, but also to violations of social and economic rights. Then, the human rights choice, the non-killing approach, would imply to stop fractionally indirectly killing people in the future by stopping firing those time-traveling bullets. This is to stop emitting carbon. The less we emit, the less we kill. That's it. And not only less future homicides, of course. Our karma will be liberated from the guilt of killing maybe thousands of other living beings, of hurting Mother Nature, or Gaia, which we are part of. We will then stop being cancer cells, killing bit by bit the greater organism we belong to. Of course, this killing through carbon emissions is in part behavioral violence and in part structural violence. It's behavioral because with our individual or family lifestyles, with our consumption choices as a non-profit or business company or university, we can have very different footprints. But it's also quite structural, because the very structure of industrial capitalism makes it almost unavoidable to have a minimum carbon footprint, no matter our personal lifestyle choices. We can choose if we use electricity from a renewable energy cooperative, but we cannot choose as consumers to close our nuclear power plants. If we were living in real democracies, then we would be fully accountable for all the structure as well, as far as we can really change it through democratic elections. But as far as we, the people, don't have the real power in our societies, which could be better defined as elective partitocracies, we are not fully guilty of this structural part of the emissions in our countries. But we indeed are fully responsible for a good part of them, the part which depends on our consumer choices. From an anthropological and historical point of view, this kind of killing, fractional, delayed, and long distance is totally new. So it's understandable that we are still confused about it and about the ways to stop it. Even in Glenn Page's works and other published by the Center of Global Nonkilling and other pacifist organizations worldwide, it's still quite absent. Page used to make the point to defend the non-killing nature of our species that through all of our history, the immense majority of humans did not and do not kill other humans. But industrial civilization, the arrival of Homo colossus, and mass consumption societies, based on the burning of tremendous amounts of fossil fuels, have radically changed that. Today, the immense majority, if not all, human beings in modern societies are collectively killing other humans. I believe that this deserves a profound consideration and a radical new approach for non-killing political science and action, and also for ethics, an approach that gets us from the closed-circle morals to a new planetary long-range and large-scope morals, which should ideally include all living beings. From my family, tribe, my country as exclusive narrow moral reference toward the biosphere or Gaia as the inclusive wide moral reference for our actions. Within this new approach, we should consider not only guns, armies, or nuclear bombs, but the immense majority of industrial consumer goods and services in our societies are weapons of life destruction. And of course, we shouldn't take the easy moral shelter of considering that everybody's fault is nobody's fault. Let's assume it. We, the people of industrialized countries, are killing people. The good news is that our lifestyles are our guns, so making them very much simpler, drastically reducing our carbon footprint, will be like dropping those guns to the floor and giving up this fractional delayed homicide and guidance. So, I encourage all of you, all of us, to seriously consider this new ethics, this new non-killing approach for the sake of life on Earth. Let's all become carbon conscientious objectors. Thank you very much.